Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack one of the most absolutely fascinating historical, legal, and economic debates of our time. We're talking about the fiercely debated names of a rapidly rising global superpower, India and Bharat. Now, we see these names used interchangeably all the time, right? But recently, they've been at the very center of a massive national conversation. So, what's the actual truth behind them? Let's find out. To really understand this objectively, we're covering 5 key areas today. First up, the modern naming controversy. Second, the ancient roots of both names. Third, partition and the brand war. Fourth, the constitutional compromise. And finally, the economics of a name change.
All right, Section 1, the modern naming controversy.
So what was the immediate spark that thrust this ancient naming debate right back into the global spotlight in late 2023? Well, it was kind of the perfect storm of political strategy and timing. It all started when the official G20 summit dinner invitations were sent out under the title President of Bharat instead of the customary President of India. And this just happened to coincide with 28 opposition parties banding together to form a political alliance strategically named INDIA. Add to that a sudden, surprisingly scheduled special session of parliament, and boom, a fiercely partisan debate literally ignited overnight. Rumors were swirling everywhere that the government might officially drop the name India altogether. Moving on to Section 2, ancient roots of both names. To find the actual truth about these two names, we have to travel far, far back to the Vedic age. Geographically speaking, if you look at the northwestern part of the subcontinent, there's an area made up of 7 rivers, including the mighty Indus. In ancient times, this was known as Sabta Sindhu. And this specific region was the homeland of a very prominent, powerful tribe called the Bharatas, who were ruled by a leader named King Sudas. Keep that in the back of your mind, because this exact geographic spot is literally the birthplace of both names in our debate. Right around the 14th century BCE, the Bharata tribe was attacked by a coalition of 10 other tribes in what's famously known as the Battle of 10 Kings. Against all odds, the Bharatas won. But here's the really crucial part. Instead of destroying the cultures of the defeated tribes, King Sudas did something unique. He chose to assimilate them. He integrated their educated people, their traditions, and their knowledge, which actually eventually helped compile the Vedas. This incredible unification created a massive empire where the people proudly identified as Bharatiya, living in the land of Sapta Sindhu. There are also some historical traditions pointing to a later King Bharatha, who united a vast landmass that became known as Bharatvarsha. And this brings us to a brilliantly illustrative game of historical telephone. While the locals called themselves Bharatiya, outsiders referred to them by the land they lived on, which was Sapta Sindhu. But when the Persians arrived, they couldn't pronounce the letter S, shifting it to an H. So Sapta Sindhu suddenly became Hapta Hindu. Later the Greeks showed up and they struggled with the H and U sounds, transforming Hindu into Indos. And finally, the Latin translation of Indos became the word we all know today, India. So, the absolutely key takeaway here is a massive mythbuster. The British did not invent the name India. It's not some colonial creation. Both India and Bharat are deeply rooted in the exact same ancient geography and history. They are literally just two sides of the exact same linguistic coin. Section 3, Partition and the Brand War. Let's fast forward to 1947 and see how this historical linguistic shift builds into an incredible geopolitical branding war during the partition of the subcontinent. When the British finally left, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan, heavily assumed that Jawaharlal Nehru would adopt the name Hindustan or Bharat. You see, Jinnah really wanted it to appear to the whole world that two completely new, equal nations were born simultaneously from the ashes of British rule. But Nehru had a very different, very clever strategy. He wanted to maintain the legally continuous entity of India. Tensions completely boiled over roughly a month after independence. Lord Mountbatten sent Jinnah an invitation to be the honorary president of an art exhibition for the, quote, dominions of India and Pakistan. Well, Jinnah was absolutely infuriated by this. He wrote a fiery letter back, flat out accusing Nehru of adopting a misleading name that would just completely confuse the world. Now, why was Jinnah so mad? Because Nehru brilliantly recognized the massive, deeply established brand equity of the word India. Retaining that name meant institutional continuity, it meant keeping established United Nations seats, international treaties, and historic military titles. Think of it kind of like this. It's as if a parent hands down the globally recognized KFC brand to one sibling, while the other gets a completely new, unknown startup called DRV. Jinnah knew for a fact that India held immense global supremacy. In fact, it's pretty wild, but even today, some Pakistani historians argue that if their neighbor officially drops the name India, Pakistan might rightfully claim it for themselves, since the entire Indus River literally flows through their territory.
All right, Section 4, the Constitutional Compromise.
Let's move to 1949, when the newly independent nation had to legally formalize its exact identity inside the Constituent Assembly. How on earth did they solve this? On September 17, 1949, the Assembly held its final, really intense debate on the country's name. There were passionate pitches from various members for names like Bharat Varsha, Bharat Bhumi, and Hindustan. But Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the chief architect of the Constitution, intervened. He expertly steered the deeply focused debate away from endless variations and strictly toward a practical, sensible compromise between the two most prominent identities, India and Bharat.
This crucial intervention led to the famous drafting of Article 1, Clause 1 of the Constitution, which reads, "India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states." And what's truly remarkable about this, the motion passed unanimously. Not a single member voted against it. It formally cemented the dual identity of the entire nation in the English language forever.
And if we look at the official Hindi version of the Constitution, it beautifully flips the phrase to Bharat Arthat India. This establishes absolute 100% interchangeability. You can look at passports, currency, or official presidential letters today, and if it's in Hindi, it says Bharat. If it's in English, it says India. Interestingly enough, this exact debate hit the legal system relatively recently. Back in 2016, a public interest litigation was actually filed in the Supreme Court asking to mandate Bharat as the sole legal name. The Chief Justice outright rejected it, clearly stating that citizens have the absolute right to call their country whatever they prefer. And ironically enough, the ruling BJP government, the very same government currently at the center of the recent renaming rumors, actually opposed the petition back then, arguing there was absolutely no constitutional need for any sort of name change.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, Economics of a Name Change.
So we know legally both names are perfectly valid, but let's explore the cold, hard logistical and economic realities. What would it actually take to entirely drop the name India today? Well, first, the legal side. It's definitely not just a simple stroke of a pen on some letterhead. Legally erasing the name requires a full constitutional amendment under Article 368. Because this alters the fundamental federal structure, it demands a grueling special majority, meaning 66% support in Parliament, alongside formal approval from at least half of the country's individual state legislators. That is a massive, massive political mountain to climb.
But hey, let's play devil's advocate for a second. Even if those immense legal and political hurdles were just magically cleared tomorrow, we really have to ask, what is the actual tangible financial price tag of this national rebrand?
To figure this out, analysts looked at a really interesting model created by South African intellectual property lawyer Darren Oliver. He accurately measured the cost of the African nation of Swaziland, changing its name to Eswatini, by comparing it directly to a massive corporate rebrand. The model states that a large corporation generally spends about 6% of its revenue on marketing, and a total, ground-up rebranding costs about 10% of that overall marketing budget. If we apply that exact formula to the nation's 2022 to 2023 revenue receipts of 23.84 lakh crores, well, it paints a pretty stark picture. According to analysis by Outlook magazine based entirely on Oliver's model, completely changing the name would cost the exchequer a staggering minimum estimate of over 14,300 crore rupees. Now, why is that number so incredibly high? Because that massive figure accounts for a dizzying logistical nightmare. You aren't just updating a website or changing a logo. You're updating global maps, countless legal documents, and global navigation systems. You're physically reprinting all the currency in circulation. You're modifying military uniforms across the entire armed forces. And you have to factor in the immense sweeping corporate rebranding costs for private businesses and NGOs across a highly diverse nation that uses dozens of official languages.
So, as we wrap up this explainer today, we can clearly see that both India and Bharat have deep, completely identical historical roots, and both hold immense national pride. But I want to leave you with this final thought. In a highly connected global economy where India is a deeply powerful, globally recognized brand, is entirely dropping that name worth a staggering financial, logistical, and geopolitical cost?
Does it truly strengthen cultural identity, or does it simply surrender hard-earned global equity? Thank you so much for watching, and as always, keep asking questions.